Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Reflections during COVID-19. My name is ElsaMarie DSilva, and I'm the founder and CEO of Red Dot Foundation. You know, it's been over a month, several weeks now since we've been locked down, but there is a reason for it. Yesterday, on a different show, I was talking to the Bangalore head of the war room, Hepzibah, who's an IAS officer, and she shared with us a graph where the cases have actually decreased because it's been more than 5 weeks that people have been staying at home. So this is a positive sign. There is a reason why the governments are insisting, and we have to honor that. But it's hard. And therefore, to stay positive, I have this show where I bring in a guest every morning at 10 a.m. so that we can talk about our experiences and see what each one is doing in different parts of India or maybe around the world. I've had a few international guests. So today, joining me from Delhi is Shabnam Siddiqui. She's the director of UN, that's United Nations Global Compact Network India. Good morning, Shabnam. How are you?
Good morning, Elsa and everyone else.
I assume you're in Delhi. Are you in Delhi or? Okay, great. So, Shabnam, how are you doing during COVID-19?
Well, I think slowly the lockdown, because it's been quite a while, and our offices closed down before the national lockdown. So we are 1 week ahead of the country in general in the work from home policy. And it was difficult initially because we are such an out and about people, and every minute is scheduled, and we're running here and there everywhere. But this new routine is not too bad.
And yesterday was Earth Day, but in many, in the US, they are still celebrating Earth Day. And you're a big nature enthusiast. So, how did you celebrate yesterday? What were some of the things that you were thinking about? Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
So nothing as such in particular in terms of activities, but staying at home, I've just got into this rhythm where what I've been doing is every morning and evening, I'm lucky, blessed to have a balcony and the tree, like just a small terrace for ourselves. So going there, seeing the birds, seeing that their numbers are increasing, their activity is increasing. And recently, what happened was that since I'm so observant of nature in general, that when the lockdown started was the time when the leaves, trees were shedding their leaves. And it was so a morose kind of a feeling that, as if everything is locking down and crashing down and everything. But just going out simply for some fresh air, you realize that the small, very, very tiny leaves of a different shade of green started coming up. And by now, 1 month in the lockdown, the trees are full-fledged in their bloom kind of a thing. So spring is here, and spring is a time of new beginnings, a time of celebration. So I think the Earth Day is completely attuned to that. It's also a realization that it should not, whatever we celebrate, whatever we observe, should not be focused on one day, but more and more of how we can take things forward. So that kind of observance, making peace. So yesterday, I think instead of us celebrating as humans the Earth Day, the Earth was celebrating the 50th Earth Day, which was an amazing thing in itself.
Are you thrilled with how nature is, taking front center place in this world? Because all of us are cooped up in our homes, and you can see the flamingos in Bombay. I think the other day in Cape Town, the penguins took a walk, and so on and so forth. And all these wonderful pictures and videos is so uplifting, right? You must be thrilled because you, on our WhatsApp group, the Evening alumni group, you keep sharing all your beautiful pictures of nature and the animals that you've clicked. So, what are your thoughts about it?
So, in some ways, I do feel guilty of being happy about the change, about the lockdown, in the sense that we know that it's only few of us who have a home, that we can be locked down in, who have the facility to buy stuff, like, to tide us over. And there are so many more people out there in the country, in the world, because we're all facing it together, who do not have access to resources, who do not have homes to retreat to. So that is a dampener. But other than that, nature itself is celebrating, and it's amazing that how left alone, like we as working in the social development sector, we think that we'll do this for nature and that for nature, and we celebrate multiple days and wildlife and stuff. But just leaving nature alone to fend for itself and to bloom in itself is such an amazing thing. And that it could be done in one stroke is all the more beautiful. And now, as we realize things, as we realize about our work, about our meetings, we did so many unnecessarily travel, unnecessary, wanderings. And maybe perhaps once we get out of it, and hopefully we should be getting out of it soon, we really, really need to think of a new normal in which we develop our lifestyles much more attuned to nature. And not that this entire episode becomes a short-term memory and is forgotten in the rush to catch up.
I'm going to come to that in a bit. But at the moment, for those who are not familiar what the United Nations Global Compact Network India does, can you please explain a little bit about your professional work?
Sure. So the United Nations Global Compact is the UN initiative for businesses. Every country has multiple UN agencies. India itself has 27 of them, and Global Compact is one of them. Globally, we were established in the year 2000 by Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General. The idea was that because business is part of society's problem, they have to be a part of the solution. The India network started operating simultaneously with the global launch, and we registered as a society in 2004 in India. We've been extremely active. Businesses operating in India, whether they are multinationals or the public sector, have been really attuned to the Global Compact. They participate, they take things forward. So that is more or less what the Global Compact does. Our entire work is aligned around four issue areas: human rights, environment, labor, and anti-corruption, around which we have 10 principles. Businesses and other stakeholder groups come together to see how we can do year-on-year progress. We have a reporting system. It's a membership organization. So what we do is every year they report on a communication on progress of what are they doing on all these four issue areas and the 10 principles. In 2015, as you might be aware, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by 193 nations around the world. And those 17 goals is what we have tied up with the principles. We're working towards it. And in this time of current pandemic, businesses have a huge, huge role to play. So, Global Compact globally and in India, we have taken the initiative of uniting businesses to think of better strategies, to invest resources, and to help the entire world to emerge from this pandemic more empathetic, more strategic, and more happier.
Thank you for sharing that. And India is actually in the forefront where CSR spending is concerned, in the sense like we actually have a law. A lot of countries don't have that, 2% CSR law. And that was something very unique that came up. Of course, now there's some kind of discussion as to how that 2% is going to be used. But for the moment, let's focus on can you share some great examples of responsible businesses and how they are taking the lead on achieving these SDGs, but also during COVID-19 they are doing their part in reducing some of those inequalities, filling in the gaps that we are seeing emerge?
So I think a number of businesses, when situations get tough, the tough get going kind of a thing. And quite a few of the businesses have arisen, doing multiple things, right from relief to R&D in terms of medical care, or to a lot of work on the ground. And what we have done at the Global Compact Network India also is we have started a webinar series. We had one of the first webinars yesterday where we are inviting businesses to share what kind of work that they have been doing, and how they can take it forward. In that, the core thing that is emerging now is that CSR is good. CSR is also very small money compared to business spends. So, the strategic investments, the sustainable development goals has to focus more from core business ideas, and whether the space for collective action. So, I'm a big proponent of working together. Collective action is the only way that we can handle any kind of crisis situation, or do sustainable development in all the spheres. So, how can businesses come together irrespective of profits and competition? Because that will always be there. That is important, but can work together. So, for example, if one company is doing CSR in terms of water and sanitation, within the same geography, can some other company take up issues? Can somebody else take up livelihood, skill education? So, how can businesses come together? And I think Global Compact is the perfect platform for that. We are not profit oriented, of course, and we are focused on the goals and principles. So we will align businesses, we'll get you partners to see whichever geographic area, anywhere in the country, can get maximum impact, because most of the time for individual business to spend 2% and then move is so difficult, because you always worry that once you leave, all the good work that has happened with the CSR would be gone in a couple of months. So how can we have this cyclical effect? How can we have collective action is what we are promoting within the Global Compact.
One of the things that I wanted to check was, see, during this time, this is a global pandemic. Everybody is in it together. And whilst, we are in a lockdown mode and it's hard for us to step out, different agencies have to collaborate to make things happen. So, for example, yesterday on my chat with Manoj Gursahani, we actually spoke about the power of collaboration rather than competition. And at this point in time, we have to suspend all those, the profit motives, the competition, and come together. Are you seeing that happen in India?
See, I think it's too utopian to ask the businesses not to think of profits. So profits are important, but coming together is can happen irrespective of the profit, because a lot of the businesses that we work with are already huge. For example, coming out of the pandemic, a couple of most important aspects will be a complete reskilling. And yesterday I was speaking to a colleague, and it was we just discussing that before this entire thing happened, integrating gender into businesses was so difficult, because businesses kept complaining about working hours and stuff. And now we realize that work from home is not as bad. So people can still deliver, people can still make implementation. So this would definitely assist more and more women, for example, joining the workforce, which is so crucial, because we are 50% of the world and we hold 50% of the half the sky kind of a thing. So those kind of things that we thought earlier were non-doable is something that have come up, and that's important to integrate this. Reskilling will be very important. The kind of digitalization that has happened. Another thing that has happened is like in this 1 month, especially in the month of March, anybody working in the non-profit sector would realize that there are tons of conferences all across the world. And just by one stroke, by stopping travel 1 month, there has been no conferences, and still the world has survived. So, how much of it can be done digitally? Do we really? What are the essentials? What are the non-essentials in terms of physical representation? So, those kind of rethinking businesses, and when businesses can save on some aspects in one domain, they can always have more to invest in the other needs that will arise after the pandemic. So I think rethinking, re-strategizing is most important.
Do you actually believe that, we'll use this as a reset? They're calling it a great reset. And we will change the ways that we operate our business in and conduct our lives, and, a lot will change, or we'll go back to business as usual. What do you think?
I think my fear is that we might go back to business as usual, But there is definitely a whole group of people who have realized a lot of things, staying at home, being close to families, just working the way what things could be avoided. Like recently, I was part of a interview panel of some like scholarships, and we did all those interviews for the first time ever on Skype, and those were half an hour interviews, and we realized that for those half an hour interviews people had to travel from remote parts of the country, but it was not, it could be something that could change. So a lot of things that could change, because the entire 1 month of lockdown has caused tremendous losses. And I would think that instead of laying people off, because that is what the trend will start, uh, uh, like removing cost would be a much more effective way of arresting the loss and jumping back, because for all the businesses that have suffered losses, they will need to double up once the pandemic is over. And laying people off will not be a solution, because then afterwards there will be nobody to work, one. And even if you find new people to get them on the same wavelength as people that you have kicked off, would not be a good idea. So I think a reanalysis of financial burdens of the businesses would be extremely helpful, because otherwise we'll be struggling for a longer time. So it will all
Yes.
depend on good leadership.
I think it's always top down driven, and also there's some push from bottom up where employees might want to work for companies that are more sustainable and creative in the way they think about their impact on environment and society. And what is refreshing is that cities are rethinking. For example, yesterday I read a report about Milan making a decision that they are not, once they open up, they are not going to open up all the streets for cars, and they are going to set aside a lot of space for for walking, cycling, and low carbon transport, which is great, because if one city does it, and an important city like Milan, then everybody else is forced to think about it, right?
True, and that's what we need, those like flagship initiatives to see what can be done, because for most of us, people get scared to try out new things. So if we see that somebody has tried and it's working, then it's easier to duplicate, replicate in different parts of the world. But I think also what needs to be done is we should not get into fads. So like just when we come out, we are suddenly extremely sustainable, extremely positive, and then we realize the work pressures make us think or go in a different direction. So that would be not helpful. Having a proper strategy, at least for like short term, long term, would help businesses rather than immediate fads.
Yeah, Ramesh Gupta says that Earth is really celebrating this period of the lockdown. Rivers are becoming clean, sky is blue, air quality is improving, and trees are greener. And he also goes on to say that collective action is necessary. At the same time, it is now required that everyone pledge to do something to protect the planet. I think we have to go beyond pledging. We really have to reassess some of the things that we can change drastically, make lifestyle changes. So, for example, travel being one of them, and I'm one of those who's constantly in the air, and maybe that's something that I have been seriously thinking of. Is it really necessary? Can I and I have been consciously over the last 3 years trying to cut down my footprint, but even then it has been so hectic. So we really have to drastically think of, and as organizers as well, can we move things online where travel is not necessary? So that's one. The second one that I want to focus on, and you kind of spoke about it earlier, is gender, the stereotyping, the norms, the expectations. And currently with work from home, women are suffering from this dual thing of work from home and work at home. And it's a known fact that women in India spend more than 5.5 hours daily on unpaid domestic care on an average. And that is, 5.5 hours more than their spouses or counterparts at home, who spend on an average 30 minutes. How do you balance this, and how can this period be that moment of reflection where we observe our interactions in our family and try to redefine, who we are and how we conduct ourselves. And
I
that
think
will definitely have a bearing on professional life as well, because you'll be more appreciative of the women or people who, have older people, persons with disabilities at home, sick people, or even single dads for that matter.
true. No, it's different. I think the only thing this could work is positive reinforcement because it's important as to what is appreciated. So, for example, in our kind of cultures, and not only India, like I'm saying, our kind of cultures in multiple countries, if we are expecting men and women to behave in a certain manner, so whatever is accepted will get repeated. Now, I'm not too sure if this pandemic will lead to, men coming out doing more work, but we have seen many families that I'm interacting with where, because you have to keep, especially families with children, you have to keep them engaged, right? So kids have taken care of household work also, and they've become community helpers. Now, that kind of community helper attitude going forward, if it gets inculcated, would really be of use. But most often, what happens within the walls of your home is different from what appears outside. And unless we know what is will be accepted and what will be, like, you get a pat on the back for, we'll only continue to do that behavior. And in this, I want to just give you an example. Essentially, I am an anti-corruption person. Like, my 10th principle in anti-corruption is what I essentially look at within the global compact. And I remember this anecdote given by the head of anti-corruption in Singapore. He said he had gone for a meeting in Japan, and this was a couple of years ago, in which there were these 10 businessmen who were standing around, in a social function and chatting. And then one of the business person, and they were joking around, right? So one of these guys told of how he had duped somebody in another culture and made a lot of profits. And he narrated the incident as if, he had done amazing, the one-upmanship kind of a thing. And immediately he said the first reaction was that all the other nine people in the group backed out because they felt repulsed with that kind of reaction. In our kind of cultures, if we kind of repeat, if it were to be repeated, if somebody talks of how they had outwitted somebody, we would not want to know what was the reaction. So I think that kind of slight behavior change and what is accepted and what is rejected will go a long way in getting a balance in our homes.
I want to point out over here that you and I are part of several, WhatsApp groups, and there are these sexist jokes that sometimes appear on the groups, and when I have nothing to do, I kind of scroll through these WhatsApp groups, and then when I come across, I kind of point out, because it is my job. My work is mainly on sexual violence prevention and gender equality, and you're always backing me up, so thank you for that. But it is reflective of our culture, where it is so normalized that people, even if they are good intention, they just don't know that it's incorrect and
Not good.
inappropriate to be putting this on, and I noticed the other day on LinkedIn, it was where you're a photographer, you're a wildlife photographer, and you are exceptional, and you have some amazing pictures, and you posted these pictures on your LinkedIn profile, and there was somebody, I don't know if he knew you or not, who actually challenged you. I think it was mansplaining, but I only glanced through it, so I was kind of shocked that somebody would question your ability and think you may have photoshopped it. And he didn't politely ask, he just made
Yeah.
a judgment, right? Do
True,
you get
true.
that do you get that often, and how do you deal with it?
No, that was one off. So essentially, I think my image is such that I have this "don't mess with me" image, whether you know me individually or you or know me through the social media. And this person definitely did not know me that I would take it up, because trolling in Twitter is understood. Trolling on LinkedIn never happens. So that was a bit strange. But that's okay. Like people can have questions, doubts are fine. But again, as you mentioned, it's good to ask than assume. And most of our angst in life is because we assume too much, and the know-it-all attitude does not help. And regards to sexist jokes, I have always believed that a person's true character comes out uh, in seeing what they can laugh at. And it is not only on gender, but it's on all the vulnerable communities. If you can, what you laugh at is a strong indicator of what character and what background you definitely come from. But I've also realized that for us to have that kind of attitude, we've been in a privileged position. I've come from a family which has respected the gender roles despite being traditional. Not everybody gets that kind of background. So being kind when we point out people's mistake is essential, because sometimes when we approach the topic aggressively, even when we are extremely irritated, it might have a counter impact. So just knowing that I can think this way is because of the way I was brought up is important, and that not everybody has had the same kind of opportunity.
That's true. And especially when you are challenging and pointing out some of these people who are really high up in positions of power, and they are oblivious and blind to their privilege and blind to their, you know, I would say their gender unconscious bias. So I like your approach of being kind and being, you know, um, kind of carrying people along. But at what point do you kind of, say a little more sternly to these people that, hey, listen, if you don't correct yourself, you have all these people who report into you who might be modeling your behavior. So, whilst I appreciate your calmness, what are the tips that you would give to be firm, especially when you're dealing with people who are in a position of power and totally oblivious about their unconscious bias?
So I think it's a double-edged sword, because people in power are also extremely vulnerable, and they would definitely not like to be called out. So the kind of distinction that I make, whether it is gender, whether it is because there's a lot of flack that the minorities face, whether you're a religious minority, whether you are a regional minority in the country, whether you are a minority because of your sexual preference in the country. So the intention always matters, because sometimes some people, when they make these crude jokes on vulnerable groups, their intention, because they've not understood that somebody can be hurt. So it's very difficult to walk in somebody's shoes to feel that kind of empathy, because we are not generally an empathetic society. So unless we have walked in somebody's shoes, it's so irritating, because and for this, for example, I travel a lot. So for me, this lockdown has been different, because apart from work, every weekend I'm in the jungle. I'm somewhere or the other, and I have these friends, for example, from the northeast, and like they are, we never differentiated nothing, but many a times, like we go to these places, and they are asked to prove whether they are Indians, and they are asked to show their I cards, which is a complete insult to their citizenship, and it's because of the underlying biases that we all have. Same thing with the Muslim minorities. So all the Muslims that individuals know are good, but the ones that they don't know, they're scared of. So unless you break those chains of ghettos that we come out from, I think it will be very difficult to move on. And just being conscious, some people are very good that way. They just need to be pointed out. So I think the differentiating factor is definitely the intentions. If the intentions are good, the behavior will change. If the intentions are to get attention, or that is the only way they can, they know they can be popular, then you can do nothing about them and leave them alone.
I know that you are a wildlife enthusiast, and pretty much every weekend you make it a point to get out of the city. Are you feeling cooped up right now because you can't get out?
Not really. So I think all these uh, ideas of frustration is everything is in the head, right? Happiness, frustration, and everything. And I realized that the reason that I'm locked down, the reason that I'm staying indoors is both to save my skin, save my health, but also not be a carrier of the virus. And once I know that that is the reason that I'm indoors, I'm not definitely feeling cooped up. A small bit also has to be the area that I'm in. It's quite green. There's a lot of birds. I understand that in Bombay, from where I am, there's a lot of houses without proper ventilation, without any opening. So it's not generally a good feeling to be indoors. So I think being out and about and the birds are chirping throughout the day. Like I think they only go to sleep past midnight because we also have a bat tree here, so I can hear the bats post dark. So I have company in terms of species, but I also look forward to going back to the jungle once we open up. But I'm not doing any kind of favor or anyone by staying indoors. It's also to save myself and to save the people I love and not be a carrier. So I think that is important, and I'm grateful for every small and big thing that I'm blessed with. To have a home, to have people who love, to have work, and to have a passion that I can pursue even in lockdown. So I'm not definitely feeling cooped up as yet.
So Spriha says, actually asks you, since you're a wildlife expert, would want to know what is your understanding on how the coronavirus has evolved. And you just said you live near a bat habitat. This all started with one of the bat species. But, my thing is that post COVID-19, I do hope that the world will go back not to business as usual, but to a more empathetic, a more sustainable living style, where we consider everyone, irrespective of any class, caste, gender, sexual orientation, or any other kind of, descriptor, if you will. I just wanted one last question. So, I've always appreciated your pictures on wildlife and, the beautiful photographs you take. What is your tip? How do you integrate work-life balance? I hate the word balance, but I do think it's integration. How do you manage it so that when this is over and we go back to our normal lives, but hopefully not normal like it used to be in the past, how can we still integrate some of your tips that you managed, where you can really, immerse yourself in nature?
I think for me, particularly, I'm generally a disciplined person. So even in lockdown, I'll have fixed times of waking up and the timing that I have my food, the time that I go for my walk, the time that I do my body. So I'm very disciplined in general. And I'm also disciplined in lockdown about my weekdays and weekends. I've seen that blurring with many people. So what I've done is all the work from home, even while I'm working in the earlier business routine. I work extensively Monday to Friday. There's no time gap, but weekends are for rejuvenation, and that continues even in lockdown. So, for example, I like to read. I like to read fiction, but I've not been reading fiction during the week. Just getting lost in a book. I don't watch much of TV and movies. That is for the weekend, and that has continued. So any kind of fiction reading, any kind of watching Netflix or Prime or whatever series, that is only during the weekend, not on weekdays. Weekdays is about work and about birding, because just to keep me sane. Also, like most of us, doing a lot of housework, and I am a cleanliness freak, so there's enough things to do at home. So
Since we are
I've maintained the balance.
okay,
I've
since we are
maintained.
Yeah, no, for me, balance means it has to be 50-50 for it to be equal, and it's impossible. So I like the word integration. But since you're streaming on Crossword, what book are you reading?
Oh, I'm reading a book by Elif Shafak on the Daughters of Eve. It's set in Turkey and Oxford. Oxford is a place that I think we both went to for the evening fellowship. So it has a lot of good descriptions about the streets and about the places. And so that is what I'm reading. Her books, 40 Rules of Love, has been my absolute favorite. I've read the book twice. I've gifted the book to different people. So in general, I have only few books here. My library is in Bombay, and there's no way I can go back in the recent future. So we'll see how we can get books. I'm not an online reader. I like hard books, hard copies. So hard copies is more my style.
Same here. I like hard copies. I can't do the online version. It's really hard for me. But thank you, Shabnam, for sharing your thoughts with us. I think we had a range of issues that we discussed. It was really
I love the conversation.
enlightening. Yeah, thank you.
Most
And
welcome. Lovely meeting you.
thank you. Have a nice day. And to all of you out there, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to all those people, watching us on Crossword, Chopper Stop, and the various social media pages that this is live streamed on. Tomorrow we have the British Deputy High Commissioner for Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, Dr. Andrew Fleming. Do join us, 10 o'clock Indian Standard Time. Bye. And stay home, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay positive.